Hello and welcome to ABP Live. I have with me today Ambassador of Argentina to India, His Excellency Mr. Hugo Gobbi. Thank you so much for talking to ABP Live, sir, and thank you for giving us your time.
No, thank you for inviting me and allowing me to express
No,
our views.
sure, my pleasure. So, Ambassador, let me begin by asking what is the flavor right now in India, and the fact that we've hardly seen previously that India and Argentina are talking about defense partnership. That's something that we rarely heard. But now your defense minister recently was here, and there are talks about Indian defense exports to Argentina. Would you like to shed some light on that, how you are looking at India as a strategic partner?
Well, as you know, India and Argentinas are a strategic partners since 2019. And this relationship has developed strong, very rapidly and fast. We reopened our military attaché office here only 2 years ago. And the level of how the relationship has developed is been really strongly and rapidly. We had, for example, the visit of the Minister of Defense, the visit of our Chief of Staff, of Joint Chief of Staff,
Right.
twice the visit of our Air Force chief. There has been more than 60 militaries, militaries from Argentina who have come to India. Has been a great, for example, to mention just a few days ago, the National Defense College has gone to Argentina,
Okay.
and there has been 6 missions from India to Argentina. So the bilateral relationship is growing very fast, and this also is developing joint training of our armed forces. It is people from India are participating in our Antarctic program. So the advances have been so great and so significant. And also Argentina is seeing India as a partner for the development of Argentina's military base, and for the buying of equipment and as a new source for buying equipment. And so there's a lot of talk in industrial cooperation in this area of defense, and there's a lot of significant projects that are being studied to advance our cooperation of having sources of Indian military hardware to Argentina.
Well, talking of the specific, defense platforms, I believe Argentina is now talking to India. It's been going on for a couple of years on buying the Tejas aircraft. There had been probably some setback. I mean, from India's perspective, I think Argentina was opting for the Korean fighter planes. But are the talks progressing now as far as India exporting Tejas is concerned?
The talks are progressing very much between India and Argentina. You know, this is a very complex area. We have signed agreements already with HAL on the maintenance of helicopters. There is a lot of interest in helicopters, and a lot of and that is that area is evolving very fast. The Tejas airplanes are very much under consideration. Argentinian pilots have come here. They have been able to fly the planes. They have seen the quality of the planes, and they were very much impressed of what India's capacity on this field, industrial capacity and technological capacity has evolved. And well, there are some technical difficulties. not linked to the airplanes, but linked to some components that
The
are,
British components.
yes, are on the planes. And of course, that can be a great difficulty for the, but in the helicopter field, it's advancing much faster. And I'm sure India will find a way to solve those issues and to be able to develop components made in India or you know, if you look how much has we advanced in the last 2 years, we will be very much surprised at how much
Absolutely.
what has been done. Sometimes, and these are very complex and difficult negotiations.
Absolutely, and they take a long time. But I believe, along with the discussions around Tejas, you're also having conversations with India as far as the Brahmos missiles and the choppers are concerned.
Yes, there's a lot of interest. We have seen the technology. We have seen how and our military authorities are very much impressed on the Brahmos and also on the capacity, with helicopters. And so there's many possibilities that are developing, and there's also being great conversations on munition.
Right.
And a delegation has traveled to Pune just a few days ago. So we are really broadening our cooperation sphere and seeing so many complementarities and areas where we can cooperate and we can advance. It has been really impressive in what has been done. And there is a great political commitment on the Indian side to develop this cooperation with Argentina, and a great political commitment of the Argentinian authorities to develop the relationship with India. So that will push it forward.
Right. But Ambassador, if I can ask you, why specifically India? Because considering the fact that, our regions are sort of different. Now, India's adversaries are different and your adversaries are different. But the fact that you're looking at Indian defense platforms, what is it that driving you to look at the Indian defense market?
Well, India is an autonomous player in the international field, and that has to be taken into account. India is a leader in the global south, one country that is a leader.
Right.
Argentina is a significant player in the global south and a very important player in Latin America. So if you look at that, how do you call it, the complementarity is already much.
Right.
Argentina, how do you call it, has a leading role in Latin America, and India has a leading role in the global south. And both are countries that have very autonomous and views of what is significant in the international field. So the possibilities of cooperation are immense, and that has been shown in how rapidly it has developed in the last 2 or 3 years.
Strategically, Ambassador, we know that India and Argentina are coming strategically closer at a time when there is a war going on in the background with Russia and Ukraine that has definitely impacted the global south, India and others, which is why India held that special conference on global south. And also there are these growing tensions between US and China, which is also impacting globally. So from your perspective, from Argentina's perspective, what are the challenges that your country is facing at this point of time that aligns with India's challenges as well?
Well, I think the greater confrontation between great powers and has three main impacts from Argentina's view. Two of them are, you can say, that are the global south. All three of them, you can say, are global south worries. The first one is growing fragmentation of the economic situation. Right. What does fragmentation say? It says fragmentation pushed to the very extreme, how do you call it, says you will not be able to trade with this partner. You can only trade with that other partner. So if that happens, it means you will have to buy at a more expensive price.
Absolutely.
And you will have to sell at a cheaper price. And for the global south, this is unacceptable. We have to keep the world economy open for all, and to the countries to be able to trade with everybody, taking into account our significant our interests and thing, and not being pushed to only trade or only relate with one country. So that is something that is important for all of us. And I think the second thing is this conflict and growing confrontation, geopolitical confrontation, is changing many, and you can look at it in the budgets. How do you call it? You don't have to think. You see the budgets and how do you call it? And you see there's more and more expenditure on defense.
Absolutely. Rising inflation.
And how do you call it? And less expenditure on development,
Correct.
on climate change, on that and those things are having a big toll on the development and growth of the global south. How do you call it? And you can see how so that is an area of great significance, because the climate change is been having a huge impact on the global south. And well, you can just see the newspapers. There's tornadoes, there is forest fires, there is Argentina droughts. Argentina just suffered a drought that wiped out 23 billion of its exports. How do you call it? And you will not stop climate change with tanks, with missiles, and with how do you call it? So that it's affecting the budgets in the many of the countries, and less and the countries are spending much more on defense and less on other areas, especially on fighting climate change and development aid. And then the third area, it raises a very important question. For Argentina, territorial integrity, as for India, is a central principle in the UN Charter, and how do you call it? And this conflict reminds for Argentina, it reminds it that 2/3 of Argentinian naval maritime projection is occupied by a colonial power who is 14,000 kilometers away and who has built a very strong military base in an area that is one of the most peaceful areas of the world. So how do you call it? It reminds us immediately of how do you call it, of the importance of territorial integrity and how it should be respected by all and in all circumstances,
Absolutely.
not in only in some circumstances. So the issue has a great significance for Argentina, and with India, we are always backing the international law and the UN Charter, and we ask the main some of the global powers to behave according to the international systems, laws.
So what you said, Ambassador, is very interesting, that, because of the war, the focus is shifting more towards, acquiring more weapons rather than on development issues like climate change, expenditure. And for India, inflation is also a challenge, the supply of fuel, fertilizer, everything. So coming to the fact that India will now be hosting the G20 summit, there are so many discussions happening whether India should talk about the war or whether it should talk about the G20 agenda, which is basically development of economies of all these G20 countries. So what do you think from Argentina's perspective should be the focus of this G20 summit? Because you are well aware about the fact that there has been, in some of the key meetings, the joint communique has not come up, again because of Russia and China. But do you think that will be detrimental if the same thing happens in the summit?
Well, I think India has been very wise in proposing its agenda and proposing and how it is managing the the the, the G20 process during this year. Why has been first, it has kept the focus on the development issues that are so significant for the global south. So, and in that sense, it has received the backing and of all of the countries from the global south, and especially of Argentina, for its agenda and how it's managing a situation. And in that sense, how do you call it? It has arrived to many agreements on that allow it to the G20 to move forward and to of significant agreements of significant importance in development, in climate change, in all areas, in women's engagement, in trade. So India has managed to move forward the G20 agenda for the good of humanity, making us feel really that we're one family and that we have one future, and without being limited by this confrontation between great powers. So in that sense, how do you call it? It has been wise because it has been able to save the G20 process, which is good for all of the countries because it's a place of cooperation and where all major economies can get together, talk, cooperate. How do you call it? And it has been able in a very difficult circumstance because in a very difficult environment,
Right.
and it has been able to push forward a very creative and significant agenda, which will do much good to the world economy.
And also, Ambassador, coming to two-way trade now between India and Argentina, I believe in 2022 there has been phenomenal growth in terms of India importing items such as the soybean oil from Argentina. Would you like to shed some light on that, because bilateral trade has really been growing?
Oh yes, our bilateral trade has reached more than 7 billion. How do you call it? And has been growing in 2021 in a very strong way, and in 2022 in even stronger way. And I can tell you, will continue to grow in 24 and 25 in a very strong way because there's few countries in the world that have complementarities as strong as Argentina and India. You can see just by looking at both countries' economic structures, you can see the complementarities and the opportunities that exist. 2023 might not be such a good year because, as I mentioned before, $23 billion worth of exports from Argentina were eliminated because of this terrible drought that hit our country. It was the strongest drought in 100 years. And but both countries will continue to grow strongly on trade. And I can tell you one thing: it's not only trade coming from, it's not only supplies coming from Argentina to India. Exports from India to Argentina last year grew more than 70%. I always say, where else do you have a partner that allows you to grow 70% in your exports in 1 year? And so that shows the possibilities and the opportunities that exist in many areas: energy, lithium, agricultural trade, manufacturing, and you can see that in the investments in Argentina. I can only mention companies from India that are taking this opportunity, like Godrej, like UPL, who's investing in agricultural technology in Argentina, like Royal Enfield in manufacturing,
Yes.
like Kabil in lithium, like Induja in the energy sector. But I can also mention things that are happening on the other side. There's an Argentinian company called Global that has hired more than 4,000 engineers based in Pune, and that has hired more than 4,000 engineers in India. So the opportunities are so great on both sides, and that will continue to grow strongly, I am sure, in the future.
And talking about complementarities in trade, Ambassador, do you think this is also the right time for India and Argentina to probably enter into negotiations of a free trade agreement? I mean, some years back there was a discussion on India, LATAM countries having a kind of preferential trade arrangement. But are you thinking about an FTA with India?
Well, how do you call it? Argentina negotiates with the Mercosur countries together. We don't negotiate alone. We have an integration process with Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Bolivia is joining. So we negotiate together as a grouping. We think the possibilities of going both ways with a free trade agreement or with how do you call it, expanding the preferential agreement, or we can do both things at the same time, because the free trade agreements or negotiations are very complex, that have many rules and take a lot of time. But for example, a preferential trade agreement that we already have, very limited, but we already have, you can expand it very quickly and that can go forward very fast. So I think the conditions are there for expanding our links, and that will further facilitate our trade. And no, I totally agree with you. It's the right moment to move forward, and I see the interest on both sides.
And Ambassador, lastly, any conversation with you will be incomplete without football or soccer in them. Now, I believe there were these discussions of, Lionel Messi's team coming to India and him playing in India, which would have been a great opportunity. But are we expecting that to happen anytime soon?
Well, how do you call it? I can say that the cooperation in the sports area is another area that we are pushing forward and that we want to develop. We cooperate in all fields, like just to mention one area. At this very moment, you have the Joint Coordination Committee in the nuclear area. Our cooperation in the nuclear field is very significant. And we, how do you call it, an Argentinian company has built a plant, molybdenum plant for medicine purposes in Mumbai. ABP has done it. And the cooperation in this field is incredibly. We want to have a cooperation just as deep and in the football area, because, how do you call it, you put an Argentinian T-shirt in India and all of the boys and girls just love it. There is so many initiatives. I can mention, how do you call it, a film that's going to be made in Kerala on this issue, on showing this love between Argentina and India on football. We have received all of the warmth of Indian society during the World Cup and the celebration. We really felt that it was our celebration, not Argentina. It was. I'm sure we have many more fans in India than we have in Argentina. And the cooperation in the soccer area is one area that we push very much forward. In the football area, and I am sure that eventually the national team will be able to come, and we will be able to enjoy a game. It wasn't. We weren't able to do it this year, but there's opportunities that will come up, and football can be a way of great significance and joy for the development of human resources in both our countries. We are just having World Women's Cup at this moment,
Yes.
and it is a real opportunity for the development of youth capacities, and I am sure with 1.4 billion Indians, there has to be at least one Messi around here that we haven't developed the full talent and capacity.
Well, that is fascinating, Ambassador. I mean, from defense to civil nuclear to football, India and Argentina collaborating across all sectors, which was really not seen, about 2, 3 years back. But thank you so much for giving us your time. That was Ambassador of Argentina to India, Ambassador Gobbi. You just heard about how India and Argentina are closely aligning themselves across all sectors. For ABP Live, this is Nayanima Basu. On camera, Ayan Hussain.